But that does not preclude us from still remaining hopeful for our mission here in this country.
Do you think that the university was attacked because it is a symbol of education, a symbol of the future, a symbol of the West?
Well, I don't want to make those kinds of conclusions. I do know that this university is a lasting legacy of the United States in Afghanistan. We produce graduates that go on to actually change things on a day-by-day basis in this country. They are bright, they're resilient, they're grateful for the opportunity given them, and the desire to continue to be able to provide them with the education they need. So we are a beacon, I think, of hope for many Afghan youth. I don't want to conjecture of why we were attacked, but I can tell you that as a university, we are doing all we can to advance education of the young people in this country.
And you may not be able to talk about this, but do you know more about the two of your professors, an American and an Australian, who were kidnapped outside the university gates earlier this month?
Well, I'm afraid I'm not allowed to talk about that particular subject at this point.
It does suggest that those at the university will have to be very committed because there's danger all around.
I think everyone realizes the environment that they're coming to this university. We are a regular university once you come on our campus. We're free, we're open, and yes, there are security concerns. We realize that. But I think our commitment to providing education to young Afghan populace trumps everything.
So I guess then from what you're saying now, that you'll be back, the classes will resume.
I think that we can make that assumption. I have to discuss this with the Board of Trustees. We are going to look at a way moving forward. Maybe there are some things that we need to do operationally, but I think we can safely say that yes, we will rebuild and we will reorganize and we will restart and we will not be deterred.
Just one last question for you personally. What will you be doing today?
I'm going to be visiting hospitals and families. In fact, I'm on my way there now. My primary duty today is to go and visit and help comfort some of those injured and also their families. I will be doing that most of the day and through this evening.
And then there are 7 funerals.
That is also something that I will be attending to, and as you know, in this culture, they do this right away, so either today or tomorrow, unfortunately, I will be participating in some funerals as well.
Mark English is the president of the American University of Afghanistan. We reached him via Skype in Kabul. Thank you very much for sharing this with us.
Thank you very much, Renee.
Nearly every political poll gives Hillary Clinton the edge with white, college-educated voters. But if she were to win this demographic group, it would be a first for any Democratic presidential candidate in recent history. My colleague Asma Khalid went to Colorado to understand this shift in voting behavior. She's back and in the studio with us. Good morning, Asma.
Hey, David, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. So why Colorado to report on this?
So I was looking at census data from the last 5 years to see what state had the largest share of white college-educated voters, and Colorado is on top. About 43% of white folks there have a bachelor's degree or more. And what's interesting to me is that at the beginning of this election, Colorado was considered a true battleground. And now a lot of analysts are saying that it actually leans Democratic. And that shift, in part, seems to be tied to the sheer number of highly educated people in the state.
And they're in large numbers, they're changing. Is this change mean that you have lifelong Republicans who are now becoming Democrats?
Well, not exactly, David. Let me explain. I went to this annual Lincoln Day dinner in Colorado Springs, and pretty much everyone there was a diehard Republican. Just before they settled in to say the Pledge of Allegiance, I met Joy Brown. She's 70, a retired math teacher, and she told me Trump was not her first choice, but she will be voting for him.
Everything negative said about Donald Trump is speculative. Everything said about Hillary Clinton negative is fact.
And David, I mentioned Joy because, look, there are lots of loyal, college-educated Republicans just like her in Colorado, and those people will not waver. But they tend to be older, and Colorado has become a hub for young transplants. Those white folks are far more likely than a native Coloradan to have a bachelor's degree. I met Amanda Burns and her husband Brandon late one evening at their house after their 3 kids had gone to bed.
We're south of Denver in a suburb called Highlands Ranch.
It's kind of a suburban paradise. Pretty much.
Lots of pools, lots of residential houses, lots of kids.
The Burns used to live in New York City. They moved here last year. It was closer to family and more affordable. Amanda and Brandon are both Mormon and politically conservative.
I am a registered Republican. I'm very much pro-free trade. You know, I've always leaned more libertarian.
But when it comes to this presidential election, Amanda was reluctant to even talk about Trump.
The things that he says are inexcusable, and they have no place in the public sphere. It hurts my feelings. Like, I don't know how to say it any other way, but he is so offensive that I could never vote for him. Ever.
When you hear her husband, Brandon, explain the election, you hear a sense of pragmatism.
I think the downside risk of a Hillary Clinton presidency is low, whereas there's a complete unknown and volatility with a Trump presidency that I just am not interested in finding out about.
So I asked him how he'll vote.
If I had to decide today, I think I would vote for, it's very difficult to say this, but I think I would vote for Hillary Clinton.
But he wants to be clear. His vote this November does not mean he's morphing into a Democrat.
I just want to say that I want Paul Ryan to run in 2020 and that I will go campaign for Paul Ryan.
So one-off Clinton Republicans could chip away at Trump's chances, but college-educated GOP defections could go another way. I went to a happy hour for young professionals in Colorado Springs, and there I met Nicola Rathman.
So normally I identify as a Republican, but I won't be voting for Donald Trump in this election.
She's a young mom who used to serve in the Army and now works as a financial advisor.
During the primaries, I was for Rubio. Once Rubio dropped, I was like, okay, well now I'll start listening to Trump. At first I thought maybe people were just taking his jokes the wrong way, but then he kind of turned me off with the number of times he said things that I felt were just insensitive.
But she's also not a Clinton fan.
Now I'm looking very interested in Gary Johnson.
Gary Johnson. That's a name I heard frequently in Colorado. He's the Libertarian presidential candidate. I wanted to get a sense of what this all means from a GOP operative, so I reached out to Dick Wadhams. He's the former head of the Colorado Republican Party. We met up for lunch at Davy's Chuck Wagon Diner. It's the kind of place that still has one of those old-school jukeboxes.
You cannot win on just Republican votes alone.
Wadhams says the Colorado electorate is about a third Democrat, a third Republican, and a third unaffiliated.
But he's got a dual problem in Colorado right now. He's got a Republican base that he's still trying to tie down. And he's got the all-important unaffiliated voters, the swing voters, especially in the Denver suburbs, who I think are dubious of him, but largely because of his temperament and behavior.
Wadhams says he will be voting for Trump, but he's not so sure about those unaffiliated people. Many are highly educated, socially liberal voters who are new to the state or, like Brian McCutcheon, have moved back after living somewhere else.
I would identify as a registered independent. I cast my first vote in a presidential election for George W. Bush.
Then, in 2008,
I very reluctantly voted Obama because I got very turned off by Sarah Palin.
he tells me voting for Trump is not an option. And for him, there's more to it.
So I don't think this is all Trump. I think some of this is the direction the Republican Party has gone since I voted for George W. Bush with my first vote. Was it Brian McCutcheon there speaking to my colleague Asma Khalid, who's in the studio with me? And I was like, why is he not comfortable in the GOP right now?
Brian told me it's the party's focus on social issues and gun rights. And so he told me he's probably going to vote for Clinton.
Okay, big takeaway from your reporting trip to Colorado?
David, my takeaway is that you have a lot of young people like Brian. And so in some ways, the college divide is actually an age divide. So in other words, the younger you are, the more likely you are to have a college education, the more likely you are to lean left. And ultimately, that as a whole is going to change the way white college-educated voters, as a bloc, will vote.
Okay. Reporting there from NPR political reporter Asma Khalid, who's in the studio with me. Asma, thanks a lot.
You're welcome.
You heard her right here on Morning Edition from NPR News.
We're live and local. We are South Florida's only NPR news source from 91.3 WLRN, 91.5 in the Keys, and 101.9 in the Palm Beaches.
Individuals aged 50 or better who are interested in social enrichment Institute at the University of Miami. OLLI members can build relationships, take trips, and join special interest clubs in this stimulating community. You can attend a free open house on August 25th at 1 p.m. You can RSVP or learn more about OLLI at miami.edu/OLLI or 305-284-6554. That's 305-284-6554.
Widely scattered showers or thunderstorms this morning, partly cloudy, hopefully by the afternoon. Our high 88 today. 82 degrees now at 7:19.
From NPR News in Washington, I'm Dave Mattingly. The death toll in central Italy is nearing 250 following yesterday's strong earthquake that toppled homes and buildings in many towns and villages. Reporter Christopher Livesay is in the town of Amatrice, where he says search teams are still at work.
People aren't as optimistic about finding survivors. Now, there is still some hope. They say it's within the first 100 hours that the window is open to find survivors. However, it's because of the construction of these buildings. They're large, stone, old buildings, some hundreds of years old, and when this earthquake struck, these buildings crumbled. And a geologist explained to me that doesn't leave opportunities in very many cases for survivors to perhaps find an air pocket.
Fire officials say more than 100 new wildfires have broken out in the western U.S. this week, fueled by gusty winds and dry conditions. They include California, Washington, and Idaho. The iconic Royal Canadian Mounted Police says it's changing its officer uniform dress code to allow the Muslim headscarf. And Carpetchuck reports.
The hijab has already gone through rigorous testing and has met officer safety standards. At least one Muslim organization in Canada says the RCMP decision sends a strong message to diverse communities, and especially women, that their choice of dress will not be a barrier.
I'm Dave Mattingly in Washington.
From the WLRN studios at the Miami Herald, I'm Luis Hernandez. The Florida sandhill crane is just one species an environmental group says the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has failed to protect under the Endangered Species Act. WMFE's Amy Green reports that the group is threatening to sue the federal agency.
The Center for Biological Diversity says the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service determined that more than 400 plants and animals may deserve protection under the Endangered Species Act. But the group says the federal agency never issued final decisions, leaving some species in limbo for up to 7 years. The Center for Biological Diversity issued a 60-day notice of its intent to sue. The group points to a recent study that found it can take up to 12 years to list a plant or animal under the Endangered Species Act. The federal law requires the process take 2 years. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service did not immediately return a call seeking comment. Amy Green in Orlando.
And this is WLRN Miami Herald News. I'm Luis Hernandez.
We are funded by WLRN members and by MedEasy Web, online EHR and billing for the behavioral health and substance abuse market, offering an all-in-one system for managing operational, administrative, clinical, and billing. Info at web.medlettersenz.com. This is Morning Edition. The time is 7:22.
Support for NPR comes from NPR member stations and from the Siebel Energy Institute, supporting scientific research to increase the safety, reliability, security, and lower the environmental impact of energy production, delivery, and consumption. More at siebelenergyinstitute.org. From FJC, a foundation of donor-advised funds, working to maximize the impact of charitable giving and to create customized philanthropic solutions. Learn more at fjc.org. And from Emma, featuring Emma Enterprise, an email marketing platform designed for franchises, agencies, and large brands. Emma, on a mission to help marketers do their very best work. Learn more at myemma.com.
You're listening to Morning Edition from NPR News. I'm David Green.
And I'm Renee Montaigne. There's a big birthday today being celebrated from the marble steps of the White House to the granite peaks of the North Cascades. The National Park Service is turning 100. When it was created back in 1916, there were just 35 national parks and monuments for the Park Service to oversee. Today, the National Park Service system manages more than 400 sites. Everything from battlefields like Gettysburg to the historic Oregon Trail, and of course the national parks themselves. NPR's Nathan Roth has had the enviable job of reporting on the National Park Service during the centennial year and joins us in the studio now. Good morning.
Good morning, Renee.
Tough assignment, Nate?
Yeah, it was a real hardship visiting some of the prettiest places in the country, hiking the Appalachian Trail with rangers, getting to shadow people whose jobs include mornings like Heidi Brill's. She's an animal caretaker. Let's hear from her.
I would say the best part of my job by far is the early mornings with the animals. Everything's so quiet, and the animals are steaming, you know, as the sun comes down and hits the forest floor, and the animals are starting to get sweated up and crossing through creeks. It's just visually a beautiful sight.
Now, a beautiful sight that you got to see.
Not so bad, huh?
Okay, but in the centennial year, many of your reports actually focused on the future.
Yeah, instead of looking at the last 100 years where the Park Service has been, how it got here, we decided to look at how it's doing right now and where it's going. We being myself and other NPR and member station reporters. And the way we did that was by identifying what we saw as the 4 biggest challenges facing the National Park Service and its future. I'm sure people would add to this list, but the 4 we identified were climate change, overcrowding, financing, and relevancy.
And relevancy, what exactly do you mean by that?
Well, the National Park Service needs to be relevant to all Americans, or at least more of them than it is now. So let's look at the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. I spent 10 days there on the border of Tennessee and North Carolina earlier this summer, tagging along with park employees like Heidi Brill while they did their jobs. And one of those days included a soggy, rainy hike with the park superintendent, Cash's Cash, and a group of about 20 middle school kids from the nearby Eastern Cherokee Reservation. The hike started like this.
Before I get into the history of anything, how many of you have been hiking in the national park?
A few hands go up. Cash tries to put the others at ease.
When I was you guys' age, I used to always think bad things happen in the woods. I was a kid that grew up in Memphis that had never been to a national park or a national forest.
Cash gives a speech to a lot of people he goes hiking with, especially when their minority groups are from cities. He wants them to be comfortable. He wants them to connect. Because it took a while for him to feel either of those things. Later in the hike, he told me the only reason he ever got over his fear of the woods was because of the Boy Scouts.
If it wasn't for that, as a kid from Memphis, I wouldn't have had that shot.
Now, Great Smoky Mountains National Park does not have a visitation shortage. That's not what's driving his efforts. In fact, Great Smoky Mountains is the most visited national park with more than 11 million visits last year. The thing about those visitors, though, is they are not representative of the community and nation around them. The park did a survey of visitors the year previous.
The average age was 41 years old.
And most of those visitors were white. Now, that's no different than the rest of the Park Service overall. For years, the National Park Service has made increasing diversity a priority, and still most of its workforce and its visitors are white. Cash himself is the first African-American superintendent in Great Smoky's history and one of only a handful in the service. Cash says that's a problem. He points to the kids.
This is the most diverse generation this country has seen. If these kids have no connection to the natural world, what message are we sending 15 years from now?
That's why Cash has been leading a centennial effort to go on hikes with folks that don't typically visit national parks. That's how he dollars in deferred maintenance. Those are roads that need to be fixed and buildings that need repairs. I mean, even in some cases, it's entire sewer systems that need repaired, but the money just isn't there. And it doesn't seem like Congress is going to give them any more anytime soon.
So you look to add funding, overcrowding, climate change relevancy. Was there anything that surprised you?
Yeah, it definitely changed the way I view national parks. I mean, I'm the kind of person that likes to go out to the parks to get away, to hike, fish, just disconnect. But I met a lot of people that wanted to visit parks to connect, either by traveling in big, loud groups or meeting other people there, or even just by posting stuff on social media, you know, taking a photo of that bear and getting a bunch of likes. And I realized how valuable that is to the parks, too. My version of how the park should be might not be your version or somebody else's, but that's okay. And I think the Park Service is realizing that, too, and doing a better job of accommodating and meeting people where they are.
Well, good stuff, Nate. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
That's NPR's Nathan Ross, who's been reporting on the National Park Service's centennial, a birthday being celebrated across the country today. This is NPR News.
Before RuPaul was the most famous drag queen in America, he was just a skinny kid with some serious dance moves on Atlanta Public Access TV.
Yeah, honey, yeah. You cannot forget the beard. The beard? Oh, no.
My chagrin, a lot of it is still on me.
You'll find it. You can. A conversation with the queen on the next All Things Considered from NPR.
Sit down, wow.
All Things Considered this afternoon at 4 o'clock here on 91.3 WLRN and the Keys 91.5 and 101.9 in Palm Beaches. Thanks for joining us on a Thursday morning. It's August 25th. The time is 7:31.
From the WLRN studios at the Miami Herald, I'm Luis Hernandez. Republican Donald Trump actually recommended that the Florida governor give a judgeship to an attorney whose work appears at odds with Trump's hardline stance on immigration. Emails newly released by Governor Rick Scott's administration show that Trump recommended that the governor appoint Jose Izquierdo, a well-regarded attorney who had backing from several other South Florida Republicans. Izquierdo had represented criminal immigrants. It's not clear whether Trump knew that Izquierdo had done work at odds with many of his policy positions. Well, there's been 2 solar amendments floating around Florida coming into this election cycle, and they're causing a bit of confusion.
I'll meet people collecting signatures for getting these amendments on the ballot, and they'll tell me, well, we know that there's one that's pro, we know that there's one against.
So what do Florida's 2 solar amendments actually mean for the Sunshine State? We'll explain that in 15 minutes. This is WLRN Miami Herald News. I'm Luis Hernandez.
South Miami-Dade Cultural Arts Center's new season is here, with outdoor concerts, cabaret shows, modern dance, music, comedy, Chinese acrobats, and so much more. For information, visit smdcac.org.
Hillary Clinton has received a lot of criticism for failing to hold a single news conference so far this year, but her campaign manager says that misses the point.
The real question here is whether Secretary Clinton has been taking questions from reporters. She has been in more than 300 interviews with reporters this year alone.
Just ahead, a closer look at all those interviews and at how many were conducted by actual journalists. We'll get to that on Morning Edition in about 5 minutes. Stay close.
Healthy aging, mind, body, and spirit is the theme of the 10th anniversary Future of Medicine Summit presented by the Palm Beach County Medical Society Services on September 15th and 16th at the Palm Beach County Convention Center. Local and national experts will discuss interactions between the mind and body and the powerful ways emotional and spiritual factors affect health. Registration is now open at pbcms.org or 561-433-3940.
It's 7:33. Support for NPR comes from NPR member stations and from W.W. Norton, publisher of The Euro by economist Joseph Stiglitz, outlining challenges and ways forward in the Eurozone with lessons for globalization in the interconnected world economy. More about The Euro at www.norton.com. From Carbonite, an automatic cloud backup service for protecting and recovering digital photos, documents, and other files from anywhere. Learn more at carbonite.com. And from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
It's Morning Edition from NPR News. I'm David Green.
And I'm Renee Montaigne. The earthquake that shook central Italy yesterday has left at least 240 people